You ready?
Okay. My project is on unethical behaviors in educators. This has been a problem for many years in our school system. And so I've got a PowerPoint that I want to share with you guys about education or the unethical behavior of educators. The first question I want to ask you guys, what is unethical behavior? Unethical behavior is a system of immoral decisions that influence or go against societal ideologies. And what does that mean? Anything that's wrong, and we know things are wrong before we ever do them. And as educators, we have to make sure we're professional and we don't cross the boundaries when it comes to right and wrong decisions. Three main topics that I want to discuss today. We're going to talk a little bit about inappropriate sexual behaviors with students. We're going to talk about social networking with students. And we're also going to talk about cheating of educators on state assessments with students. Those are major issues that are of great concern in education today. And as we look at social media is just what the Gen Xers, and now we have the Z generation. Everybody's all about social media. And where do we draw the line being educators and with students? And so we look at, there are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, all of these different social networking sites. But as educators, we have to make sure that we maintain a level of professionalism and integrity in communicating with our students. Now, some do's and don'ts. First of all, we have to follow the guidelines and procedures that are set in our school technology program or our technology policy. The first thing we have to do, and so often as educators, we don't do this, we have to examine our school social media policy. And now, maybe 20 years ago, schools didn't have those policies, but today, there are policies that are set in place for us to follow. We cannot friend or follow students on social media. We should not, but I know some educators do. But if you want to stay in the guidelines and you want to maintain that professionalism and you don't want to cross the lines when it comes to unethical behaviors, you want to make sure you don't friend students and you don't follow students on Twitter and on social media. Guys, and what teachers need to do, we need to use Remind if we need to get things out there to our students. No personal text messages, no inboxes. Just maintain that integrity and use Remind, and that way it goes to all of your students. And with Remind has something that if your administrator needs to go back and check you, Remind keeps all of the things that you send. So that way it's checks and balances, and you can't say, oh, this teacher, the student can't say you sent something inappropriate when it's out there for the world to see on Remind. So as we look at this, guys, look at our school's privacy statement. What does it say? We just can't put all kind of pictures out there without express consent or permission from parents. So we as educators, there's some do's and some don'ts, and we've got to follow these guidelines. How can we limit unethical behavior? We need to make sure there are some PDs, professional development, there are some workshops, because so often technology, as it improves and as it changes, we too as educators have to change along with them. So we may not know the things that are out there for our kids, that our kids are getting into. So as educators, we need to make sure that we are in line and in sync with what's going on in the world. We've got to look at policies and guidelines, make sure somebody has to develop specific guidelines for us to follow. And the last thing, guys, we have to set up we have to communicate expectations. What is it that we're expecting you to do? What is it that you want from us as educators? What is it that we're expecting even from students? So there is a level of training that has to go forth when it comes to workshop skills, coaching. We have to be educated, and I think a lot of times we're not educated on unethical behavior when it comes to social media. We know do's and don'ts, not to be in a classroom left alone with a child. I know for me, if I have a student in my classroom, the door's open. If I have two kids, that's not a big deal, but I will never, ever, ever be in a classroom, male or female, by myself with a student. Because you don't want anything, there's a word that says you don't want your good to be evil spoken of. And so let's look at some of the social dilemmas. When the lines, I I hate to use this word, but maybe this is a good term, when the lines are blurred, we have to figure out what's in the best interest for us when it comes to our integrity as well as for our students. And these are some pictures I found on the internet of teachers that have been arrested or been charged with inappropriate relationships with students, whether it's been, and most of this is through social media, it's through texting. This woman right here she was arrested and she's accused of sexting. And here's this teacher right here that's convicted of sending inappropriate text messages to students, and here's one right here, all of these. So we have to make sure we don't get ourselves caught up in these dilemmas. So sending inappropriate texts or photos out, cannot do it. Slander on media. We may not like somebody, we may not like what's going on in our schools, but as educators, we can't put it all out there like unless you don't want your job. We have to be cognizant of what it is that we're putting out there, because it can, and most definitely at times will come back to bite us. So we have to make sure of the slander on media. We have to look at that. We know that some educators are fired for inappropriate text on social media. And we know in our school system, we've seen that firsthand, where people have been reprimanded, not necessarily fired, but reprimanded from putting things out there on social media. You just can't do it. And the last one we're going to talk about, guys, is inappropriate communication with students on social media. That's when we get into the inboxes. We can't do those things. Now, testing integrity. We know with No Child Left Behind, our schools we're at this place where we're stressed out when test time comes, because we know that our kids have to make a certain grade. We're judged. Our report cards, we're judged on our students' performance on standardized tests. And some teachers, some educators feel the need to want to cheat on tests. But at the end of the day, you're not cheating. You're hurting the student. Let me put it like that. You're hurting our school system, because when we find students that are cheating or help on the test, you're not helping them, you're hurting them, because they may need remediation. And we'll never know it if people are just cheating. And here are some things what I came up with when it came to testing integrity. Now, when we look at the guidelines, it says, what is cheating? Cheating is defined as any action that violates the rules for administering a test, follow the guidelines scripted, and most of us have given standardized tests. We know you go by the script, you do not deviate from the script. If a student has a question about a question on the test, you tell them to read the question again. We go through a lot of trainings to ensure that our tests have the fidelity that is needed at the end of the day. So we have to make sure that we are knowledgeable of what is expected, and thus we have the training. Now, and these are some things that we should do. And at the end, and I love this one at the bottom, it says, recognize that educators cannot plead ignorance. That's why we have the training. And at the end of the training, that's why we have to sign off. I understand, I acknowledge that I've read, I understand. And so understand that ignorance is no excuse when it comes to educators, when it comes to testing. You know the do's and the don'ts.
That's right.
It says first degree cheating offenses, erasing answers and changing the students' answer choices, filling in the blanks. If they left them blank, we want to go back and fill them in. You can't do it.
Right.
You have to tell the students, look at the time. And I think the standardized test that I've always given tells us that after, you give them a 5-minute warning, and that's it. After 5 minutes, the students have to realize, hey, I'm not finished and I've got to bubble in something. But you give those instructions before the test and not during the test. So overtly or covertly in providing answers, falsifying students' identification or tracking numbers, suspending, and this is a big one for some. A lot of times we don't want kids that are going to score low. We don't want those around our schools come test day.
Yes.
But that's a form of cheating, and so often administrators, maybe they know, but maybe teachers really don't know. You don't grasp the severity of it because it can cause a negative effect. Now, then guys, look at this. I love this caption. Then, if you get caught cheating, you're going to be in serious trouble. And this is the teacher speaking to the student. And then now, look at the student talking to the teacher. If you get caught cheating, you're going to be in serious trouble. So back then, the kid was the one that was cheating, trying to get a better grade on the test. And now today's time, it's the teacher cheating, trying to make sure the student gets a better grade on the test, because for some schools, it's about whether or not I'm going to keep my job, whether or not I'm going to get an increase in pay. So we have to look at this and look at some second-degree offenses. Cueing students for incorrect answers, for example, you sure? Are you sure about that answer there? Are you sure about this answer? And allowing cheat sheets and giving extra time. When there is a certain amount of time given on the test, that's it. If it's 30 minutes, it's 30 minutes. Not 30 minutes and 5 seconds, not 30 minutes and 10 seconds, it's 30 minutes, whatever it may be. We've got to make sure that we follow the guidelines. Consequences of institutional cheating. And I think if we looked at this when we're talking about cheating, guys, what will happen is, I don't think many teachers would do it if they realize the consequences of their behavior. So when we look at, people have been criminally prosecuted for cheating. There was a case in Atlanta, Georgia in 2013 where there were 13, well, it was really like 34 teachers, and it was principals, and it was a superintendent, and they were all charged, but all of them were not found guilty. I think it was like 12 that were found guilty in that scandal. Even the superintendent, she died before she actually was convicted. Beverly Hall, I do believe that's her name, but God rest her soul. But at the end of the day, guys, she was trying to make sure the kids receive AYP, which is adequate yearly progress. And if the schools made at least 70%, they would have received bonuses. And with her system, it was all about rewards and punishment. So you did whatever was necessary. You were told to do what was ever necessary to ensure that your students got a passing grade. So when we look at the consequences, criminal prosecutions to termination, suspension of, guys, your license, if we're educators and if we don't have our license, how are we going to make a living? So we have to be aware. Schools may lose funding or be ordered to close, all for cheating. The school score may be rendered invalid, and establishment of an environment of lowered expectation that impacts the student's ability to achieve. Guys, if we cheat for our kids, who's to say that these kids, well, how do we know what the kids know? Let's put it like that. Kids will go into college and they will believe that, hey, I'm on this level because your standardized tests have proved that. And then you get into a college setting and you're taking developmental studies classes. So we have to be aware of that. Now, let's look at the following the code of ethics. And this is a part of maintaining, this is the part of, what is this? Inappropriate, maybe sexual relationships with students. Guys, we have to make sure we follow the code of ethics. Maintain professionalism. That's one thing that I like about our superintendent. He always talks about our dress, our attire. And a lot of people don't see it and don't understand it, but the way you dress is the way your students will perceive you. So we have to look at professionalism, and we should be professional at all times, as well as in our dress, in our talk, and the way we carry ourselves. We've got to learn to respect our colleagues, our students, and our families. And all of this, guys, goes back, in my opinion, it goes back to even with social media. Even as educators, we can't put anything out there. We can't put risque pictures out there on social media, because then what happens to respect of colleagues and students and families? We'll lose that when we go out there looking like that and we're putting it out there for the world to see. And guys, we have to emphasize academic and extracurricular excellence. And so often we're not doing that. Guys, avoid casual touching. As I'm gonna tell you this, as an educator, I don't touch kids. If I tell them, hey, you mind stepping outside? If they choose not to do it, guess what? I'll buzz the office, I'll call an SRO, but I will never put my hands on a kid. If a kid, hey, let me hug you, I may do a side hug. But they will initiate a smaller contact. You have to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. And you don't want kids thinking or saying anything, oh, she touched me inappropriately or he touched me inappropriately. But how do you do that? Just avoid casual, I'm going to avoid the casual touching. I ain't touching it. Decline off-campus and student gatherings on student-only gatherings. Guys, I ain't finna socialize with you. Don't invite me to your birthday parties. I'm not coming. I may come to a church event, and I may chaperone some dances, but no, we're not socializing off campus. Avoid being alone with the student. We talked about that earlier. If a student comes in my class and has to take a test, the door is open. You want me? Yeah, it's closed because I'm in here by myself. But now you're in here, the door's got to be open. That's just for me. I want it so somebody can pass through here and you can see what's going on. That's for safety. And the last one right here, guys, avoid social media friendships. And I tell my students all the time, I'm not your friend, I'm your teacher. So we don't have to be friends on social media. And the last, I think this is like the last slide, we're going to look at teacher-student relationships. We're going to look at extra school academic relations. What that is, guys, I am here in school with you. I'm your teacher. Whatever you need, I'm here to help assist you academically. Ms. Harrell, I need some help in formulating this problem. I don't understand what's going on in this class. I'm here to help you, and that's my job as a teacher. So that's the intra-school academic relationship. And then the intra-school extracurricular activities. What that means, extracurricular relationships. What that means is if I'm a coach, I know I have to deal with students on the extracurricular side. If I am a sponsor, if I sponsor a club, Key Club, if I do any of those clubs, then I know I have to interact with you, but still in the school setting because it's intra, so it's in school. And the last one, guys, is interpersonal and non-related relationships. That's when we draw the line. That's when things can get blurred, and that's when things can go from professional or ethical to unethical. So we want to make sure that we keep our relationships with our students here and not here.